Awesome. Well, thanks for coming out to my talk today. My name is Ben, and I'm a developer relations engineer at Google, covering the Android for Cars space. And so the title of my talk today is Get Your App on the Road, Build Apps for Android Auto and Automotive OS. So today, we'll be walking through everything you need to know to get started with building apps in cars. Starting with a brief history, we'll then learn the specifics of how apps work in cars, as well as how you can test and publish them. But before we get into the details, I think it would be helpful to take a look in the rear view, and see how cars got where they are today with regards to Android. So just to be safe, even though this is probably the only room that I've ever been in where everybody knows what I'm about to say, I'd like to introduce the two platforms that make up Android for cars. The first is Android Auto, which is a phone-powered experience that connects to your car over either a wired or wireless connection, and powers experiences like maps and music. And then the second is Android Automotive OS, of Android that runs directly on the car itself. So Android Automotive OS, there's a subset of those cars called cars with Google built in, and those come with Google Play services, the Play Store, and Google Maps, kind of what GMS is on the phone side. And for the purposes of this talk, whenever I'm going to say Android Automotive OS, that is really kind of synonymous with Android for cars, or sorry, cars with Google built in. It's just a little bit easier to say Android Automotive OS, less markety. But yeah, so Android Auto was first announced just over 10 years ago, and it first became available in cars back in 2010. Since then, it's had 2 major UI refreshes and has become the standard offering in 98% of cars sold today. Along the way, apps have become more and more of a focus, and the UI refreshes have reflected that because they've focused on improving the app experience. Likewise, Android Automotive OS was announced in 2017, and it first shipped with the Polestar 2 in 2020. Since then, more and more OEMs have begun shipping cars with Google built in, and today, 10 brands are already shipping cars, and more are announced that they will be doing that soon within the coming years. And then finally, as the platforms themselves have evolved, so have the types of apps that you can build for them. Starting with the launch of Android Auto, there were media and messaging experiences, kind of the 2 main core use cases for staying connected and entertained on the go. And then Google Maps was available from the launch, but starting in 2020, third-party developers were also able to build navigation apps and point of interest apps. So you can find places to go and be able to get there, and you can provide that as a developer. Then in 2022, these categories also became available on Android Automotive OS with the introduction of the Google template host. And then later in the year, we opened up video apps for use while parked, not while driving, on Android Automotive OS, opening up some new ways to stay entertained while you're out and about. But if you're waiting for your kids at the pickup or if you're charging your car. The IoT category was also added later in that year, so you can do things like shut off the garage door or engage your security system as you leave home or as you approach. Finally, in 2023, we got games and browsers, again, in only Android Automotive OS cars, so another way to kind of kill some time on the go. And then this year at I/O, we announced weather and communication apps. So those both are going to be coming out later this year. Weather on both platforms, communication apps, just to start with, on Android Auto. If all of that's a lot to remember, you'll be happy to know there's a good table on developer.android.com. You can scan the QR code if you want, that has the details on what the category entails, how you can build apps for that category, which platforms are supported for that category, when you can use it as a user, so whether it's during driving or parked, and then also like how far you can publish it, like whether you can go to closed testing, open testing, production. So that's kind of a really helpful page just for staying up to date on like what's available to build. So, that's great and all. You can build for cars, but why should you do that? As a business, you have to it needs to make sense. You have to have a reason to do that. And the answer is pretty simple. People spend a lot of time in their cars. On average, US drivers, they spend about an hour each day in the cars, and the numbers in Europe aren't too dissimilar for those that drive. For apps that can be used while driving, this is a huge amount of time, that otherwise might not be tapped into. So that's a great opportunity to reach your users wherever they are. Additionally, among EV drivers, their owners and any passengers that are with them, when you're charging out and about, not at home, they spend an average of 42 minutes charging their car. That's in the US, but again, that's not going to vary too much just because all the cars are kind of the same across the world. Plus, as Android Automotive OS vehicles begin to ship with more displays, there's going to be opportunities for usage both while driving and while parked for passengers for any of those types of entertainment apps that are too distracting to use while driving. So now that we've covered what you can build, why you might build, let's get into how you can build. So at a conceptual level, there are three main ways that you can build app experiences in cars. And one or more of them, they might be applicable depending on your app's category. But I think just breaking it down by kind of how they work is helpful for thinking about how to build. So the first and most basic is just by using some of the standard Android APIs that have been designed to support specific use cases on mobile or otherwise. So for example, messaging apps on Android Auto, they use the common messaging style notification format so that they're able to know how to read and format your notifications and display them to users. Additionally, for the upcoming audio while driving experiences for video apps, which basically, so whenever you start driving, the video itself will be hidden, but the audio can continue to play and you can control it as a user. That uses media session to allow you to control the apps. The next one is services, and client services is kind of what we call it internally. And that sounds like some sort of finance thing, but what I really mean is it's implementing an Android service that gets bound by a host app. And then that app, in turn, presents your app's content. So both the media browser service used by media apps and the car app service used by templated apps, so things like navigation, point of interest apps, they fall into this bucket. Because the host app, the one that's displaying everything, is ultimately in control of what's going to be shown, this pattern is used because it reduces your need to consider all of the different regulations about driver distraction and other UX restrictions. And then finally, there's plain old activities. So for any apps that are available while parked, such as video games and browsers, the entire app is built using activities, which often can be the exact same one that you're using on other large screen devices. They benefit from any optimizations you make there for the layout or other input methods. And then finally, other apps in other categories, they can use activities for parked-only experiences, for setup, sign up, and other flows that are kind of ancillary to the main flow. So if you had a media app, you can use an activity to enable sign-in. And also finally, activity-based experiences, they're only available on Automotive OS right now, but we have the Car Ready Mobile Apps program that we announced at I/O that will help bring some of those experiences to Android Auto as well for the video games and browsers. So yeah, let's get down and dirty and see what that looks like under the hood. On the system API side of things, they don't really require much beyond what you're probably already doing to have a good experience on mobile. And that's by design. We want to just make use of what Android's already doing, so you don't have to do too much more. For example, the mobile messaging apps I mentioned earlier, they use messaging style notifications, including using inline replies, using the remote input. And for Android Auto, really the only thing that isn't already recommended for mobile is adding a support for marking messages as read. And if you really want to, after you've added that support, you can do it only for Android Auto by making it a hidden action on the notification on phones. And so you can really very kind of stealthily improve your product's experience, even if you don't want to support that on mobile. Moving on to services, let's start with the media browser service. And also this includes its newer equivalent in Media 3, the media library service. Technically, these are general purpose APIs that can be used by pretty much any app on any form factor, but in practice, they're really mostly used on cars. And at the core, what they allow is you can expose your app's content library in a tree and allow other apps to browse and control your content. So this makes it so that a host app, Android Auto in this case, or the Media Center app in Android Automotive OS, they're able to handle the task of actually drawing all the UI that the user sees, and then they communicate with your app to navigate through the screens and load content. All you have to do is provide all the information about the titles, any flags about like, is it an explicit song or any of those sorts of things. So at their core, there's going to be 3 main steps for building media services like these. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to demonstrate the media browser service stuff. That's what we have most of the documentation is on currently. But media library service is pretty similar. And then, so the first step is going to be to initialize media sessions, or a media session, and share that with the host apps or the system. And then enable other things like playback controls via that. Let's see. Then the next step is going to be to implement the logic to return the root of your content tree. And so what this means really is, if we go back 2 slides, those top 4 items, those are going to be the root of your content tree. So that's kind of the top level view of your app, if you will. So in this case, it's going to be like the home, playlists, favorites, and radio. And so that's going to be where users are able to navigate through your app at the top and see kind of the most important things that you as a developer decide to show. This can be very simple. You can just return the same thing in any case, but also you can return different things based on the hints that you receive or who's calling you. So, if you want to show something different on Android Auto versus Android Automotive OS, you could. Or there are other apps like the Google Assistant experiential driving can also use this. So there's options there. And then finally, the last step is to actually load the children of any given subtree. And so this is what enables users to navigate through your media items and select what they want to look at or play. Each node in your content hierarchy is going to be represented by a media item object. Each of those is identified by a string. And then you basically are allowing the host app to say, hey, I want to look up the details for this item, and it'll call this method for that item. And then it can also talk to your media session to say, play this, pause this, I want to search something else. That's how all that works. And then also to make your implementation more robust, you can share the code between your Android Auto and Android Automotive OS implementations by modularizing your code base. For example, you can put your media library service or media browser service, all of that can live in one module, library module, that then you use or you reference as part of your app module and your automotive module. So that makes it so that you can just include only what you need in each of those application modules. So you don't have to bundle, for example, in Automotive OS, you wouldn't bundle all the activities that you can't actually use. So you can cut down on your project size and also improve build times and all that sort of stuff. So that's a very high level view. There's definitely a lot more to get into. So if you're interested in building a media app for cars, there's a few resources to check out. The first is the Universal Android Music Player, or UAMP is what we call it. So that has a reference implementation that covers both Auto and Automotive OS. There's also a whole media section on our documentation for building for cars, and a specific page with Automotive OS that covers things that are specific to that platform, such as enabling sign-in experiences, because that's not supported out of the box by the Media Center app. Cool, I think everybody's gotten their photos. Moving on, the other type of client service is the car app service. So this is what's used to build templated apps such as navigation, point of interest, and Internet of Things. But additional categories are always going to be explored and supported. So currently we are announcing weather is coming. But yeah, other apps are going to start using that as well in the future. As with media apps, a host app, in this case Android Auto or the Google template host on Android Automotive OS, is responsible for drawing the UI that the users see. And to begin building a templated app, you start by creating a car app service subclass. Then the car app service is itself a subclass of the service. So that's kind of the core of using Android's background work, or doing background work on Android in a long-running fashion with communication to other apps. So the core purpose of the actual car app service is just to manage all of the different session instances. And so those are kind of just the instances of your app running on a host. So you can think of the session as an instance. So kind of like if you have a task on Android, there's one task per if you have multiple versions of your activity running. So then, like other Android components, it has a lifecycle of its own. So you can, create resources on create, tear them down and on destroy, all that sort of stuff that carries over to car apps as well. And there can also be a one-to-many relationship between car app service and session. So for example, if you're doing cluster display support for a navigation app, you'll have one session for the main display and then another session for the cluster display. So they're independent of each other, and you need to like synchronize anything using like the application context or another higher level location. And then screen instances are going to be kind of what represents the individual parts of your app that gets shown to user. And these manage UI by, they describe the UI that you're going to show to your users using different templates. I'll get to that in the next slide. And so each of those templates, they specify a type of layout or interaction format, and each screen basically describes how a template is composed. And again, as with the screens, they have a life cycle, so you can build and destroy resources as you need. So yeah, when it comes to describing your UI, there's a bunch of templates available to build with. These can be categorized roughly as layout templates, so things that just kind of help you organize your content in familiar ways. So we got pane template, list template, and grid template. That's pane template kind of displays a single item, list template, list of items, grid template, list of items, and a grid. Easy. Then there's going to be some map-based templates, and those basically allow you to put your content alongside a map because, again, these are mostly apps that are built for use while driving, so having a map is often super, super helpful for users to get the context of where am I going, what am I doing, what is the importance of all of this content that I'm seeing in a quick and glanceable way. And then there's also kind of some user flow templates, if you will, that enable kind of critical things that most apps do. So just showing a notification or allowing people to sign in or search. So if you're looking at it, a very basic app using all these different components can actually fit on just one slide. Moving on from kind of what I've discussed already, there's a few things here that you might see that weren't covered in the previous slides. So in your car app service, there's also the ability to say basically which hosts you trust and which ones you want to expose your content to, because ultimately, you are giving over some of your app's data. So you probably only want to do that to apps you trust. So in this sample, it's just saying, hey, I trust everybody. But obviously for a production app, you're probably going to limit that down to just the Google template host, or if you're working with another OEM, their template hosts. Additionally, in the onCreate session, you'll see it takes a session info parameter. And again, that's going to be how you can determine, like, for the cluster display instance, like, oh, okay, I'm running on a cluster display. I should do something differently because of that. So you can have different types of sessions based off of which session info you're receiving. And then finally, in onCreate screen, you'll see that there's an intent parameter. And again, like activities on normal Android stuff, you can look at the intents that were used to start your app and say, okay, I'm going to change how my app behaves by looking at this intent. So maybe I'll, go deeper into the app to a specific page, or I'm going to preload something based off of that. And again, as with media apps, you can modularize your code so you can share everything across two platforms more easily. And then before I get on to the rest of this, one caveat I want to say is there is a little bit of UI that you can actually draw yourself, and that's going to be actually the maps themselves. So up until recently, this was just navigation apps with the navigation template, and then there's 3 templates that were just deprecated in 1.7. So the map template, the place list navigation template, and the route preview navigation template. And they got replaced with this new map with content template. It's a lot of words. But basically, the new one is a more general purpose API. So there's navigation and map with content template are the 2 that we're sticking with. And with both of those templates, you're able to draw to a surface. And you can use views and compose to render to virtual display and then copy that to the surface. And then obviously, if you have full control over that, what we actually do is we check that you're not kind of abusing that. There's a manual review process on the Play Store side that checks, you're not building a game that can be used while driving by doing this. But you can, if you want to say, just show the speed limit, you can render that onto the surface as well. So you can add driver essential information, but that's kind of it. So as with media apps, there's a lot more detail you can get into on how all of this works. So we've got a code lab, a bunch of documentation, and also some sample apps that show a full implementation of all of that. Cool. So finally, let's talk about activities and all the way that Android Automotive OS might break some of the assumptions that you've made when building for other form factors. Again, these primarily apply to video games and browsers, but they can be relevant for any activity-based experiences in other app categories, so media, sign, and screen or something. And first up is driver distraction. So by default, Android Automotive OS doesn't allow anything to be available while parked. So that's what this looks like. You know, you're parked, you can do anything you want with the view, with the activity. But then as soon as you start driving, you're gonna have an overlay that says this isn't available. And you know, the exact text will vary by the OEM, but the implementation is the same. The only activity that can actually be annotated and accepted to the Play Store as being available while driving is the car app activity that's used for templated apps. Anything else, your app's going to get rejected if you try to enable that. And additionally, if you have any media playback that's going on, you have to pause that whenever the car begins driving, just so that the user doesn't get distracted by that. So there's additional guidance on that's linked later about that. So, okay. The next up is navigation. So by that I mean in-app navigation, so being able to move between screens within your app. And unlike other form factors, which might require a back button or a touch gesture to be able to allow users to go between screens in your app, there is not a requirement for that on Android Automotive OS. So as such, you need to make sure that your apps are able to let users move through your app only using touch affordances, which is, you know, a little unfortunate, but it does actually improve the user experience on other devices sometimes. So, you know, if your user is on a big tablet, being able to just touch the button that's already near their thumb can be easier than you know, trying to pick it up and do a touch gesture. And this also doesn't necessarily mean that you have to add a back button everywhere. So for example, if you have a main screen with a bunch of drawer navigation on the bottom, that works as long as you're able to get through the screens. The key thing is just users don't get stuck on some place and then they have to go and restart your app to be able to reset it. And then next up is system bars. So there are a few things to consider here. The first is that system bars might be sized and positioned differently than on other form factors. For example, they might be positioned on the left, right, and bottom, like in the example here. Or even when they're normals, like, you know, status bar on top, navigation bar on bottom, they're gonna be a lot bigger usually than on other form factors. So if you're using like a fixed dimension padding to avoid system bars, that might not work on automotive anymore. So yeah, if your app render is behind the system bars, check that it actually handles all of those system insets. Otherwise, you might end up like this, where there's content that's being cut off on the left side because, oh, there's something on there's a left system bar, but I never expected that. And then whenever you handle it properly, now your content's all in a safe area. And then secondly, with system bars, Automotive OS has an ability to let OEMs control whether or not you can hide them. OEMs can prevent apps from hiding these system bars so that they can make sure that vehicle controls, so in this case, like HVAC and the seating controls, that those are always available to users. And then what this means is, you know, don't just assume that, oh, I called hide to the system bars from, you know, window insets controller. Don't assume that that's going to be successful because otherwise, if you do, you might have optimizations that you've made and then you might be hiding stuff. So in this case, there's actually a playback bar that's hidden. And you know, at the top of the screen, there might be the closed player view that's also hidden because it's assuming that the system bars are gone, but they're not really gone. So make sure that you're also actually looking at what's showing or not showing. And speaking of things that cause insets, let's talk about display cutouts. If you've ever worked with mobile, display cutouts look like this. Like they're usually just a notch at the top or bottom of the phone. It might be a pinhole as well, so they're usually pretty small. They usually fit within the system bars, so you don't really have to care about them. Automotive is different. So there's these kind of big curved screens that we see. You can't quite tell from the photos, but basically at the top and right side of the screen, that's where the curve, you would normally cut out or cut off content if you went fully into the cutout. So if this is probably a better example, you can see this is like the first row is fully scrolled all the way over to the right, and the last item is like really cut off. And then like the app title at the top is basically not visible. But if you account for cutouts, then the app bar is completely visible, and then the scrolling can go all the way to make sure that the item is able to be shown completely. And then again, we've got some resources that go deeper into all these things and kind of the code that you would use to adapt to those situations. So you can check out the code lab or the documentation for it. And then finally, there's some other things that might be relevant, and this applies across all app types for Automotive OS, and this is just based off of kind of how the OS works, and as well as just what's available on it. The first is going to be screen orientations. So unlike the vast majority of mobile devices, every screen in a car shipped with Google built in today has a fixed screen orientation, so that's either portrait or landscape. Unlike TVs, those are only landscape, so you only have to consider one thing. And as a result, sometimes if you require a feature for either of those, that means that half the cars on the road won't get your app because, or wouldn't get your app because they don't have the matching screen. So that can be either an explicit feature requirement like this, where you're saying, I absolutely need this, or it can be implicit, and this is kind of the one that's a little tricky. So for example, if you have an activity that says, my screen orientation is portrait or landscape portrait or centered portrait, then Google Play kind of assumes from that, oh, I actually require this device to have a portrait screen, so I'm not going to send this to any landscape devices. So to pass play review, currently you have to explicitly say that you only want these features to be optional. So that means saying required equals false for both the portrait and landscape feature. And then the next is system architecture. So again, unlike mobile, where pretty much everything is ARM, like 99% or something, the cars are running a mix of both x86 and ARM. And again, this is only mostly relevant for video apps and games, where you're going to be using an NDK library potentially, which then you have to have probably the x86 version of the library would be kind of the weird bit. Finally, there's some difference between the hardware and software features present in cars as compared to mobile devices. On the hardware side, there might be features that aren't available, so things like telephony, camera, or network location. And kind of like screen orientations, you have to watch out for the implicit feature requirements as well here. Because, for example, if you say, request the course location permission, that implicitly says, I'm requiring network location as a hardware feature. So in that case, you might want to make sure that you have a explicit optional one if your app is able to function without the network location provider. So if you're using Fuse location provider, you're usually good to go. Then on the software side, things like app widgets, picture-in-picture, multi-window mode, those also might not be available on Automotive OS vehicles. And the best way to do that check is just to use Package Manager to do the check at runtime. And then, so if you have any UI that, for example, that would say, have a button to say enter pip mode, you can just make sure that's not hidden if the feature isn't present. And then that works across all devices, not just any Android Automotive OS car. And also, there might be some GMS modules that you rely on mobile that might not be available on automotive. So again, if you're using camera somehow, but it's not like a core part of your use case, you might be using some of the GMS modules that are related to cameras, like the barcode scanner. So just be aware that that might not be available. You should check out runtime if it is available. So yeah, now we talked about how to build your app. What about how to actually test it? So as you begin developing, you can use the desktop head unit to test Android Auto apps. This runs directly on your development computer. You connect your phone either over USB or you could do theoretically Wi-Fi ADB, I think. And it lets you simulate a bunch of different head unit types and see how your app looks there. Also, if you're developing a templated app, running your app on the desktop head unit gives you a nice debug view that lets you know more about like why your app crashed, as well as some additional like metadata about like which template is being shown or which step in the, like what your stack depth is for navigation. Then there's also the Android Automotive OS emulator. So this runs natively on your computer as well. There's a few different flavors. So there's kind of the standard one, which is just pretty plain. There's the configurable one, which is what I was using to show the display cutouts and the system bars. That lets you move around those system UI bits so you can simulate some of the other less common types of OEM setups without having to rely on them publishing an emulator. And then now there's also a distant display emulator to allow you to simulate moving apps between screens, like some cars are starting to allow you to do. Also, there are some OEM emulators available, but just be aware that they might not be up to date. They might not be available on your given laptop's hardware. So use with caution. And then also we have a Pixel tablet EAP currently running to allow you to put Android Automotive OS on a Pixel tablet so you have like a physical hardware device. So if you're interested in that, you can scan the QR code to request access, and we'll be reviewing that continuously as we move forward. And then eventually it'll be available to everybody. So yeah, and then if you do happen to have a car, there are ways to test your apps in cars. In real cars. For Android Auto, there's going to be two options. So the main one is going to be installing from Play. And then the other option is there's a developer option in the Android Auto app to trust untrusted sources, but that only works for media and messaging apps. So if you want to build a templated app, you'd have to do it through Play, either like internal sharing, internal testing, closed testing, any of that would work. And then for Android Automotive OS, again, that's only through Play. But you can use internal closed testing, open testing, depending on what's available for the app category. One note with Automotive OS, there's no ADB. You don't want people trying to root their car and then bricking their $50,000 car. So make sure that you have some sort of logging solution that allows you to get logs uploaded remotely. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to debug things. Great. So you've built and tested your app. How do you get it to your users? The first thing you're going to do is go to the advanced settings page on the Play console, and then there's a form factors tab. So once you're there, you're going to enable both Android Auto and or Automotive OS, depending on what you want to support, and go through the checklist that you see. So this is the one for Android Automotive OS. So after you do that, there's all these lists of tasks, and then you can publish your app to, there's going to be specific tracks that you're going to want to use. So for Android Auto, it's all part of the mobile app, so you just publish it as part of that standard track that's used for phones, tablets, Chrome OS, and whatnot. And then for Android Automotive OS, there is a specific Automotive OS only track, so make sure you check the drop-down and make sure you're uploading to that. It won't let you upload a mobile app to Automotive OS or vice versa, so it won't work, but it might be confusing if you don't see the little drop-down. Cool. So that's it for now, but there's plenty to come on the roadmap. So if you want to stay up to date on what's happening in the Android for Cars space, there's a page on developer.android.com kind of listing all of the recent updates. So that's a great way to stay in sync even if you aren't actively working on the area all the time. You can check in every half a year or whatever and see, oh, this is new and maybe I should do this for my app. Cool. So yeah, thanks for coming to my talk. I hope you learned something and are maybe going to be able to go out and delight your users in their cars. And I think we have 6 minutes left, so let's switch over to Q&A.